Good morning everyone. Today we're going to take a look at deploying Windows Server 2022 Core Edition and remote administering it with Windows Admin Center. This is something that every Windows admin is going to need to know how to do. So let's just get straight into it. So over here on the whiteboard, what we are going to do is we are going to take an ISO copy of Windows Server 2022. We're going to load this into a virtual machine. So we're going to have a nice VM over here. We're going to take our ISO, hook it up to our virtual machine. We're then going to install Windows Server Core Edition into here. Now with Windows Server 2022 and all the way back to Windows Server 2012, you've been able to run this as a full GUI edition or as a core edition. As a core edition, if you RDP to the server or you remote connect to the server, all you're going to see is a command prompt. So we're going to look at actually when we configure this as a core edition, how we can actually configure our settings for this too. So we're going to run a couple of commands on here to actually do config of this Windows Server machine. Then what we're going to use is we're going to use a separate computer over here, and we're going to install a magical thing called Windows Admin Center. Now what the Windows Admin Center is going to do is it's going to give us a lovely HTTPS interface to actually go and remote administer this machine from this HTTPS interface. It's essentially a replacement for the old server manager if you've seen that. So let's get straight to the demo and actually go and set this stuff up. So I'm over here on my virtualization platform, and I have got initially my Windows Server 2022 ISO loaded. This is the first thing you're going to see when you actually boot from a Windows Server 2022 ISO. So let's just step through this setup process. I'm going to go next on here. I'm going to go install now, and that's pretty much most of it. There's not many settings here with Windows Server 2022 during the initial installation and configuration of this. We will get an option in a moment that asks us to select, here we go, the standard evaluation or the standard evaluation desktop experience. The default setting here, this is Core Edition. It doesn't say Core Edition, but notice there's a desktop experience and there's one that's non-desktop experience. The non-desktop experience is the default, that's going to be Core. So if you just next install this, you're also going to get Core Edition. I'm just going to choose custom here, make sure I'm selecting the right drive. I want to flatten this entire hard drive. I don't want to partition anything. I might want to in the future partition, but I can do that with disk management. Let's go next on this. And now it starts to work. So let's just wait for our operating system to actually install onto our computer. This shouldn't take more than a few minutes. If you're on a decently spec machine, the thing that's going to slow you down is mostly the speed of your hard drives. So if you've got an SSD or an NVMe flash drive, this should be pretty quick.
A few moments later.
Okay, approaching the end of this now. Our updates are installed, it's finishing up, it's going to do a restart. Let's jump in there and restart this computer so we can get straight into configuring this. I'm not going to press any key to boot from CD or DVD because that would boot me back into the installation process. I'm just going to wait for this ISO to actually pass by and jump straight into the operating system here. Once this is loaded up, it will show us Windows Server Core Edition and we can get about to actually configuring that. Okay, now we're loaded into what is the initial configuration screen of Windows Server Core Edition. You can see there's nothing really here. There's just a command prompt. It's asking me to change the admin password before I get signed in. So I'm going to click into this. I'm going to press OK, and I'm going to set myself an admin password on this computer. This is the local admin password, not your domain admin password. And it does help if I type the same password twice. So now we're in, and this is Windows Server Core Edition. Now at this point, we could use some of our command line skills to go and do some configuration, but we have this option here to be able to run a command called sconfig. Now even though Server Core Edition doesn't actually have a GUI as such. This is the closest you're going to get. This allows us to do the basic configuration of Server Core without really worrying too much about knowing the commands inside here. One of the first things I need to do is just drop into network settings. So I'm going to use number 8 there to drop into network settings, and I'm going to want to configure some IP addresses for this machine. Because it's a server, I want to configure some static IP addresses. So I'm going to select the index number of that network adapter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go and set the DNS servers of this network adapter, and then I'm actually going to go and set the IP addresses of this network adapter as well. So let's jump in here and let's go to set the DNS server. So we're going to choose number 2, and our preferred DNS server is actually going to be 172.168.10.10 because that's the DNS server inside this environment. We don't have any alternate DNS server. There's only one inside this environment. That's fine. We need to go back now into this network configuration, and we need to go and set this network adapter address as well. So this network adapter address is actually going to be a static address. We're going to type S there for static. And when we select that static address, we're going to enter the IP address of 172.16.10.15 because that is a spare IP address I have on this network. Your IP addresses are obviously going to vary dependent on your environment. We'll use a default class B subnet mask there, 255.255.0.0, and the gateway for this network is 172.16.10.1. Okay, so now all of our configuration for our networking is actually done. That's lovely. So what we can also do is we can do things like renaming our computer here, but let's do that in a slightly different way. So let's go and exit this command line and return back to our PowerShell. Let's just do a $ps version table, just to show us we are running PowerShell version 5.1 here on this machine, which is the out-the-box version of PowerShell we get. So let's go and rename the computer with the PowerShell command. We'll use the computer rename or command rename computer, and we're going to call it SEA SVR4. This is for Seattle Server 4 inside here. I will need to reboot the computer before I get a proper name change. So let's just do that now. Let's go restart this computer and wait for it to reboot. We'll log back in and we will check our configuration of our Windows Server Core. There we go, we're now rebooted back in. Let's Control-Alt-Delete and let's put in that password that we set earlier for the local admin account. And let's just go and check our computer here. Give it a moment to load in. It's going to load sconfig by default. And we're just going to check the name of that machine. There we go, it is actually set to SEA SVR4. Now, one of the things we also have here is a work group, and this is set to the work group of default work group. We want to join this to one of our domains as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this again through PowerShell. We do actually have a domain controller running inside this environment using contoso.com. So I'm just going to use this add computer here, -domain name contoso.com with a credential of Contoso administrator. Now, of course, your domain controllers, admin passwords, and domain names are going to vary. But for me, I'll just pop it in like that. And this will join the server core computer to a domain. So the fact that you don't have a GUI, it's not very scary to actually get this thing up and running. It's very, very quick, very, very easy to just change a name and go and join this thing to a domain and change an IP address around. The thing is though, once we're in here, we don't really want to do all our day-to-day admin tasks of our server core edition from within this command prompt. We want to do it from a separate machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump across to a machine that has a full GUI. Now this could be Windows Server Data Center Edition if you want it to be. This could just be Windows 10 or Windows 11 if you want it to be. And what we're going to do is we're going to go and download and install something called the Windows Admin Center. The Windows Admin Center is a great way of administering lots of computers inside our environment. It's free from Microsoft, and it allows us to use just industry standard HTTPS interfaces to go and do administration of lots of computers. So we're just going to go to this URL, aka.ms download, and it's going to grab our Windows Admin Center installation, the actual latest edition. Now I could, if I wanted to, go and search for this as well. So let's just go and accept these terms. and I'm going to do a next install. I'm not going to bother with any of the extra configurations in here. It is going to use a self-signed certificate for the web interface. If I'm on a corporate environment, I might want to create my own certificates for this though. And as that's installing, just to prove a point, you don't need that special URL. You could just drop to the Googles and go and search for Windows Admin Center on here. Let's accept all that. And you'll find this Windows Admin Center over here does have a download link inside here for downloading that Windows Admin Center too. Doesn't take too long to actually build, so we'll just wait for this to install on our machine. Okay, so the Windows Admin Center has completed installing, and what it's done is it's given me a URL to connect to. This is actually a URL that's looping back into the machine that I'm currently on. So to connect to this Windows Admin Center, if I just drop to the URL of this computer, so at the moment this machine is called SEA-ADM1, and connect to it, I get the Windows Admin Center running on here. This is running on a web server now locally. So I don't want to read what's new, but there is now on version 23.11, so quite up to date at the moment. And you can see that I have my existing server actually loaded in here. Now Windows Admin Center itself is quite blank when you first load it. It does have extensions that do need to be updated, so leave it to crunch and wear away like that. It's a little bit like Visual Studio Code in the sense that it doesn't really come with anything out the box, and what Microsoft have is a full extension system to manage stuff. This is not just for managing Windows either. If I jump into the settings of Windows Admin Center while it's doing that updates over here and have a look at this extensions piece, you'll actually see extensions here not just for things like Active Directory and Azure Cloud Shell, but you'll also see extensions for things like Dell PowerPath and Dell Open Manage and HPE storage. So there is additional enterprise software here that can also be managed by Windows Admin Center. But what we are interested in managing is that existing core machine that we just installed. So very quickly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Add on here, and we're going to add a server that's inside this environment. And first of all, let's go and add our domain controller, because we have a domain controller inside this environment. So let's go and add this SEA DC1 domain controller. Give that a moment to go and find it. And we can go and add that domain controller in. It's going to use my existing credentials to be able to connect to it initially, but what I can actually do is I can change the credentials if I really wanted to for how I want to connect to this as well. But I am currently logged in as admin. So let's go and add in another server, and let's go and add in our SEA SVR4. Remember, this was our core edition. Wait for that to search and find. Now it's found SEA-SVR4.contoso.com, and we're going to add that guy in as well. So what we can do now is we can jump directly into this if we really want to, and we can actually go and administer this computer remotely now. So if I jump into SEA SVR4, I never have to go back to that core edition interface if I don't want to. All of the information I need is here within that Windows Admin Center, and I can add as many computers as I want to this. So it should tell me all the specifications of this machine. During an initial connection, it takes a little bit longer to load, but I can see that I've got 8 gigs worth of RAM. I can see the processor inside there, the uptime that's had, and all that fun stuff. What I can also do is I can click through some options down here, so I can see the events in the event viewer. I can see certificates on here. I can see installed applications. I can even go through, if I want to, and do packet monitoring for here. So you can integrate packet captures and actually see network traffic in real time from within the Windows Admin Center. That's kind of cool. I can also go into roles and features here, and I could install and uninstall Windows Server roles from here. But if I wanted remote administration, there is an option of being able to remote administer through PowerShell on this link. So this is going to make a connection to SEA SVR4. Takes a second to make that initial connection, but once I'm in, it's going to log me in with my currently logged in credentials, which is Contoso Administrator. But you will see that I'm actually on this specific machine. So if I do get-process, this is full PowerShell. I can do anything I want via PowerShell remotely here. You can also click on Remote Desktop. Now, even though this is Windows Server Core, you can actually RDP to a machine of Windows Server Core. It doesn't have that disabled. It just has on the RDP only the command prompt actually coming up. So I'm just going to go to the settings on here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that remote desktop is actually turned on, because initially it's not, but I'm remotely turning on the ability to use remote desktop on that server. Something you always have to do on Windows Server computers when you initially install them is turn on RDP, because it is not installed it is installed by default, but it's not turned on by default. So now that's actually turned on, I can go back to remote desktop. I've never had to actually leave this process here. I've never actually had to leave Windows Admin Center, and I can make an RDP connection. I could do that for my other computers as well if I wanted to, and I can come straight back to Windows Admin Center, and I can jump into any other machine that I've got. So that's Windows Admin Center, and that's how to actually install and configure a fresh copy of Windows Server Core Edition and then remote administer it through Windows Admin Center. Hope you enjoyed this content, guys, and you'll join me next time for some more Windows deployment and Windows Server content.
And you know the routine, hashtag like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed this video and will join me next time. Goodbye.